Hey everyone, I'm RRabbits, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Patrion. And unfortunately the wiki isn't updated yet, but the description on the actual Monster Legends video says Patrion is part of the Feline Squad, a group that fights evil and injustice. Patrion's ferocity and skills with the swords have made him the main attacker in the squad, but he has one flaw. When he sees innocents being hurt, he gets so ferocious and he becomes uncontrollable. And so here we have the newest and latest premier monster who just looks absolutely amazing. He's a combination of MMO monster and Taiga, that's what it looks like. He's so phenomenal. Design wise he looks incredible, and you're gonna find out that stats, skills, traits, everything is incredible about this monster. And so anyways, as of the time recording this video, there's a total of 25 light legendary monsters. And so this analysis will compare Patrion to those remaining monsters. So starting things off with power, 3553, this is actually the highest power for light legendary monsters. That's right, he's in first place now. This beats Taiga and Lathe, who used to have the highest power. As for his life of 29,556, this actually puts him in 9th place along with Volgar the Pure, the VIP monster. And as for his speed, he's 3,432, which actually also puts him in 9th place along with Taiga. So he has a pretty good speed, a pretty good life, and an incredible power. As for his trait, and this is kind of odd because a while ago it said hardened and then I refreshed it and it changed to immune to stun. So I'm not sure whether it's hardened or immune to stun, though I would prefer if it's hardened because being a light monster, you can get dazed, you can get blind, you can get stunned. There's so many different things that can happen to you in the light category. So while immune to stun is an amazing trait to have, I think I would prefer hardened. Regardless of what trait he ends up having, both are really good. Although I do want to say that if he was to have hardened, it would make him a better monster to put on defense. Because having immune to stun on defense, there's so many easy ways to counter that. So once again, in a nutshell, regardless of what trait he ends up having, they're both really good. His power is phenomenal, his life is good, and his speed is good. And his design is just absolutely amazing. Moving on to his ultimate attack, Popular Cubes deals massive special damage to all enemies, applies stun to all enemies. Wow, this is an ultimate skill that deals 70 special base damage to all of the enemy monsters, and if for some reason they happen to survive, which I guarantee you they won't survive, they're going to be immobilized, they're going to be stunned. This is truly a fantastic ultimate attack. This is what ultimate attack should be like. AoEs, deals massive damage, and if for some reason the enemies still survive, they get immobilized. That is incredible, there's no complaining from me here. There's really nothing worth mentioning in skills group 1, so on to skills group 2 we go. And we start things off with support from Bill, and get ready for a mouthful. Removes all negative status effects from itself, heals itself by 30%, applies energy regeneration to itself, applies regeneration to itself, requires cooldown. And let me just say that this is like the master of self skills. The only thing that's missing is a damage boost, but you remove any debuff you may have, any blind, any daze, any DLT, anything. Like even if you were to get 2-turn possessed, you can just use this skill and get rid of the possession on the following turn. But not only that, you heal yourself by 30%, so if you were damaged, your life is going to go up by 30%. And not only that, you get life regeneration and stamina regeneration for the next 3 turns. I honestly don't believe this skill is going to stay like this. To have a 24 stamina cost, which is extremely low, and to have a 1-turn cooldown, that doesn't make any sense. With everything that this skill does, it should have like a 3 or 4-turn cooldown. A 1-turn cooldown, a low stamina cost for everything, I just don't see this being possible. If this does remain the way it is, this is definitely a must-have skill. Honestly, even if it changes, the cooldown doesn't matter too much. If it was to change, it's a must-have skill. You have to run this. Having a self skill, like I've said multiple times, that makes it so you're immune to possession. And this skill just does so much. Again, you have to run the skill. If you don't run the skill, I don't know what you're doing. Next up we have Blue Fire, removes shield from one enemy, deals massive light damage to one enemy, applies sunburn to one enemy, requires cooldown. And this skill deals 65 light based damage to a single enemy, has a 19 stamina cost. That doesn't look real to me either. 19 is really low, especially for a skill of this magnitude, and it has a 2-turn cooldown. So this skill will remove any shield the enemy may have, and it applies sunburn. Sunburn, for those of you that are new to the effect, it basically does 2 things. The first of which is that it reduces the enemy's HP by 15% for 3 turns, and it also reduces the enemy's accuracy by 15% for the next 3 turns. So it's a really great DLT that currently no monster in the game is immune to. And next up we have Blue Blade Projection, deals moderate special damage to all enemies, applies bleeding to all enemies, requires cooldown. So here we have a special base skill that deals 40 damage to all of the enemy monsters, 24 stamina cost. Again, what's up with the low stamina cost? 2-turn cooldown, and it applies bleeding. Bleeding reduces the enemy's HP by 10% for the next 3 turns, and it also reduces the enemy's damage output by 20% for the next 3 turns. So not only do the enemy monsters lose life, they also deal less damage to you. And a skill like Blue Blade Projection is fantastic. Combined with this monster's amazing power, combined with the fact that he's an attacker, you're going to give him strength runes, an AoE that deals 40 damage, special base, you don't need to worry about light on light damage, and it even adds an additional DLT bleeding that no monster is immune to. What more can you ask for? This monster, Skills Group 2, everything is amazing. But before I get ahead of myself and recommend everything from Skills Group 2, let's talk about Skills Group 3. And we're going to start off with Limb Breaker. Deals massive light damage to one enemy, applies bleeding to one enemy, remove all positive effects on target, requires cooldown. This skill deals 70 light based damage to a single enemy monster, it costs 28 stamina, has a 2-turn cooldown, it applies bleeding, and it removes any good effects. This is yet again another amazing skill. A skill like this, for example, given this monster's power, if he had no strength runes, it would deal around 10k or a little over 10k. That's how powerful it is. But that's with no strength runes. This monster obviously needs 1 or 2 strength runes. And on top of all of that, keep in mind that it also applies bleeding, and it also removes good effects. Now when you're going up against light monsters, a lot of them tend to have skills that can give themselves life regeneration, or stamina regeneration, or both, or some sort of buff. So let's just suppose the enemy did have life regeneration. Not only do you deal 70 damage and remove that life regeneration, then that paves the way for the bleeding to get rid of the enemy monster. And what can I say other than so far we have not been disappointed with this monster. Next up is Lich King Slayer, removes 20% of total life from one enemy, requires cooldown. And so compared to the other skills, this one's kind of interesting. It deals no damage, it costs 36 stamina cost, that's the highest we've seen on this monster, has a 3-turn cooldown, and it reduces the enemy's life by 20%. And so with this skill, it doesn't matter how many strength runes this monster have, his power wouldn't matter. It could be over 9,000, that wouldn't matter because this skill removes a certain percentage from the enemy's HP. If the enemy monster had 100k life, for example, this skill would take away 20k life. If the enemy's total HP was 1000, this skill would take away 200 HP. So power doesn't matter for this skill, and a skill like this would probably be the most useful for dungeons, specifically against bosses, but for real world PvP or for real world team wars, this skill is rather useless. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, like, it can be useful against like really tanky monsters like Gerses or monsters like Oros, because regardless of how much life they have, it's 20% of their life that's going to get diminished. But keep in mind, he also has bleeding, he also has sunburn. Sunburn does 15%, bleeding does 10%, so those are way better than doing Lich King Slayer. So out of all of his skills, I can't recommend this one at all. And anyways, for the last skill we have Shining Blue Blade. Deals heavy light damage to all enemies, applies sunburn to all enemies, applies damage boost to itself, requires cooldown. Wow, this skill deals 45 light based damage to all of the enemy monsters, costs 23 stamina cost. Again, what is up with the low stamina cost? 3-turn cooldown, it gives sunburn to the enemy monsters and a damage boost to yourself. A damage boost increases damage output of all of your skills by 50%. And I gotta say, in terms of all the different AoEs in the game, this is by far one of the best because it does so much. First of all, it's 45 damage, so that's insanely good combined with this monster's power and the fact that he's going to have strength runes. Second of all, it applies a DLT Sunburn, which no monster is immune to. It reduces the enemy's HP by 15% for 3 turns, and not only that, it also reduces their accuracy, so it reduces the likelihood of them landing hits on you. But on top of all of that, it also gives you a damage boost, which sets up for your next attack. This is like the mother of AoEs. It is insanely powerful. This skill does so much. It's almost like his self skill. It's also like the mother of self skill. It does so much. And now to get to the difficult section of this video where we decide what the best skill set is. As you can see, there's 5 really good skills. There's 2 from Skills Group 3 and all of Skills Group 2 are amazing. So this time I'm going to start off by talking about runes, because for runes it's really easy. 2 strength runes and a speed rune, or 2 strength runes and a team speed. This monster's an attacker, you're going to treat him as such. Now the skills is when it gets really hard because it really depends on your preference. The obvious combo is to do Shining Blue Blade followed by Blue Blade Projection. That is most likely guaranteed to wipe out all of the enemy team, assuming the hits land. That is 290 accuracy AoE you're going to be using. And so if you do happen to use both of these AoE skills, you have to decide between the remaining 3 skills what is best for you. You could run Blue Fire or you could run Limb Breaker. That's probably what you're going to have to be deciding between. Limb Breaker is 70 damage, applies bleeding, removes good effects. Blue Fire is 65 damage, so less initial damage. However, the Sunburn will be more effective, and Sunburn also reduces the enemy's accuracy and it removes any shields. Now when we're talking about light monsters, you don't really need to worry about shields. Shields really come more into play with earth monsters, but that doesn't mean that you can't face an earth monster in Team Wars, especially now with the library wars. Like, anything can happen, there's so many different elements you can face. So at the end of the day, you're gonna have to decide what works best for you. You could also, instead of running both AoE skills, run both Blue Fire and Limb Breaker and then decide between your favorite AoE. That's a totally valid option. Or lastly, if you wanted to, you can completely forget about running support from Bill and just run Blue Fire, Blue Blade Projection, Limb Breaker, and Shining Blue Blade. So really all of your strong attacks, that's another viable option. Because you have to keep in mind, if you use this monster in a battle, you could probably use Limb Breaker or Blue Fire to take out one of the enemy monsters. And if you do happen to take out one of the enemy monsters, you really don't have a use for the AoEs. If you already eliminate one enemy monster, on the next turn you can just use your other strong skill, whether it be Limb Breaker or Blue Fire, to take away another enemy monster. And don't forget, you're in a team of 3, so your other monster is not just standing in the background, he can also take out an enemy monster. So you can just rely on your single target attacks. They do have a greater accuracy and they are overall stronger. So there's many different angles you can use with this monster. For example, in a team of 3, if you have a denier and you have your Patrion, you can have a support monster that can give him increased accuracy to make sure that the AoEs do land, to make sure that they don't miss. In which case, shedding Blue Blade and Blue Blade Projection, given the fact that they do sunburn and bleeding and you get a damage boost, that's guaranteed to wipe out the enemy team. So there really isn't a wrong option. And honestly, if this monster did actually end up having Hardened and not immune to stun, I think I would have recommended Blue Fire, Blue Blade Projection, Limb Breaker, and Shining Blue Blade, just because that would make him a really good monster to put on defense. Because first of all, there would be a 20% chance he wouldn't be immobilized, and if you did happen to get a turn in, the AI, it didn't matter what skill he does, whether it be Blue Blade Fire, Projection, Limb Breaker, or Shining Blue Blade, whatever skill he did, it's going to be effective against the enemy team. And so yeah, at the end of the day, you're going to have to decide for yourself between these 5 amazing skills. What works best for you? Please let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, that is going to conclude my analysis on Patrion, a truly amazing, incredible addition to the light monster category. I just can't get over what a truly amazing attacker he is. I really want to hear from all of you guys. What do you guys think about this monster? Compared specifically to the light attackers like Taiga and Lathe, how do you think he compares to them? Is he better than them? Is he worse than them? Please let me know in the comments below. Like seriously, do you think he's a contender for the top light attacker? Let me know. And like always guys, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.